Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The storm came without warning. One moment, the towers of Hogwarts rose serene and golden against a lavender dusk. The next, thunder cracked over the black lake like a whip from the heavens. The surface of the water churned as though something vast and unseen moved beneath it. The castle's torches flickered, guttered, and for a heartbeat, every light in Hogwarts went out. In the Ravenclaw Tower, Alara Byrne startled awake. Her quill rolled from the parchment where she'd fallen asleep studying, and her books, thick with notes on ancient runes, lay scattered like fallen leaves. The window panes rattled. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, the storm ceased. Alara rose, clutching her wand. "Lumos," she whispered. The tip of her wand glowed, but weakly, like a candle fighting to stay lit. Something was wrong. The air itself felt thick, heavy, as if soaked in magic too dense to breathe. The castle groaned in its foundations, the kind of sound it only made when something deep beneath was shifting. She hurried down the spiral staircase, her slippers whispering on the cold stone. In the corridor below, other students were stirring, murmuring uneasily. Portraits muttered to each other in worried tones. One painting of an old wizard with a silver beard called out to her as she passed. "Child, did you feel it too? The pulse?" Alara slowed. What pulse? But the portrait had already fallen silent, eyes darting side to side in painted fear. When she reached the great hall, she found it already half filled. Professor Longbottom was there, wand drawn, speaking in hushed tones with Headmistress McGonagall. The enchanted ceiling showed only clouds swirling in confusion. No stars, no moon. "Alara Byrne," McGonagall said when she saw her, her sharp eyes softened slightly. "You're awake early." "There was a storm, Headmistress, but it stopped." "Indeed," McGonagall murmured. "And yet the effects remain. Something has disturbed the castle's wards. Spells are faltering." She gestured to Longbottom, whose attempt at conjuring light fizzled and died midair. "It seems our magic is misbehaving." Alara frowned. "But that's impossible. The wards of Hogwarts are ancient." "Ancient," McGonagall interrupted, "and older than any of us fully understand." She turned to the gathered students. "Return to your dormitories. Stay calm. We will investigate." But Alara did not return. Long after the hall had emptied and the teachers' voices had faded into the distance, she slipped through the corridors again. Curiosity had always been her flaw, one she inherited from generations of Ravenclaws before her. If the castle itself was groaning, if the light of her wand flickered, then something deep within Hogwarts had shifted. Her steps carried her toward the one place she knew she wasn't supposed to go, the sublevels beneath the dungeons, where ancient stones and sealed doors whispered of forgotten ages. It was there, far below the warmth of the great hall, that she found the first sign. The passage was lit only by her dim wand light. Water dripped rhythmically somewhere far away. The air was colder here, carrying the earthy scent of centuries. At the end of a narrow corridor she saw it, a wall that shouldn't have been there. Smooth black stone veined with silver, untouched by time or moss, and carved across it were 4 sigils. One bore a lion, proud and fierce. another a serpent coiled in defense, the third a badger standing watchful, and the fourth a raven in flight. The founders! Alara's breath caught. She reached out a trembling hand, tracing the sigils with her fingertips. The stone pulsed faintly under her touch. A voice whispered, not in her ears, but in her mind. You stand before the boundary of all that is. Do you seek what lies beyond? Alara staggered back. Who's there? But the voice said nothing more. Only the faint hum of magic remained, vibrating through the stone, resonating in her bones. She swallowed, fighting her racing heart. This must be a test, she told herself, an enchantment from the founders, something left behind. Her instincts urged her to leave, but curiosity, the kind that made her the top of her class, that had her sneaking into the library's restricted section at night, kept her rooted to the spot. She drew her wand again. Alohomora, the word echoed down the corridor, and to her astonishment, the wall responded. The silver veins flared to life, the sigils burning bright, and then the stone began to shift. The wall opened, splitting in the middle like a great set of jaws. Beyond it lay darkness, a darkness so pure it seemed to drink the light from her wand. And then she heard it, a heartbeat, slow, vast, ancient. The air trembled with its rhythm. She stepped back, terrified now, but before she could flee, the wall sealed again with a sound like thunder. The heartbeat stopped. The magic faded. When she finally returned to her dormitory, dawn was breaking over the lake. She tried to convince herself it had been a dream, the kind that came from too much studying and too little sleep. But as she pulled her blanket over her shoulders, she saw that her fingers still glowed faintly silver, as though she had touched something not meant for mortal hands. And somewhere deep below Hogwarts, unseen and long forgotten, something stirred in the dark. Morning rose pale and cold over Hogwarts, casting its first light upon the mist that hung low over the lake. The storm had left the world washed clean, but an unease lingered in the air, a faint pressure like the moment before lightning strikes. Alara Byrne sat alone at the Ravenclaw table, her breakfast untouched. The chatter of her classmates drifted around her like the hum of distant bees, but she scarcely heard it. All night she had dreamed of that black stone wall and the whisper that had crept into her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the four sigils pulsing with silver fire. Across the hall, Headmistress McGonagall stood in quiet conversation with Professor Longbottom and the charms master, Professor Flitwick. Their faces were grave. Once or twice, McGonagall's eyes flicked toward the enchanted ceiling above, which still refused to return to normal. The storm clouds lingered, brooding and unmoving. When the morning owls swooped in through the high windows, a flurry of parchment rained down upon the tables, but one of them veered sharply, landing before Alara. The parchment was sealed with blue wax, bearing the crest of the headmistress. Her heart skipped. She broke the seal and unfolded the message. Miss Byrne, your presence is requested in the headmistress's office immediately after breakfast. Miss McGonagall. Alara's spoon clattered from her hand. What could she possibly have done? Did they know she'd gone exploring? The whispers around her grew faint as she stood, the letter trembling in her hand. She climbed the staircases, one of which decided, inconveniently, to change direction halfway up, and found herself before the stone gargoyle that guarded McGonagall's office. Peppermint Toad, she guessed, remembering an old password. To her surprise, the statue leapt aside. The spiral staircase carried her upward into the circular room where portraits of past headmasters watched her with solemn eyes. McGonagall stood by the window, the morning light glinting on her spectacles. "Miss Byrne," she said not unkindly, "you were seen wandering the lower corridors last night?" Alara's stomach turned cold. "Yes, headmistress, I couldn't sleep. I wanted to see if everything was all right after the storm." "Indeed," said McGonagall. "And did you find anything?" Alara hesitated. Her mind flashed with the image of the wall, the sigils, and that deep, thunderous heartbeat. "Nothing. Only old passages." The headmistress studied her closely. "Strange things are stirring, Miss Byrne. Spells are faltering. Charms are failing altogether in some areas of the castle. We are not certain why. Professor Longbottom tells me you have a particular interest in ancient magic?" "Yes, Professor." "Then perhaps you can assist us. I will not have students wander in alone, but I intend to assemble a small group to help investigate these disturbances under supervision." Alara's eyes widened. "You mean you will report to Professor Longbottom this afternoon?" McGonagall said, a faint smile touching her lips. "And Miss Byrne, whatever it is that has awoken beneath our feet, we must treat it with the utmost caution. Some knowledge was sealed away for a reason." By midday, Alara stood at the edge of the greenhouses, the crisp scent of soil and herbs in the air. Professor Longbottom waved her over, his hands muddy from tending to a row of mandrakes. 2 other students were already waiting: Scorpius Malfoy, pale and sharp-eyed, and Amara Patel, a Hufflepuff, with a calm strength about her. "Right then," Longbottom said, wiping his hands on his robes. "Headmistress says we're to look into the magic surges. We'll start below the dungeons near the old foundations. I know you've all heard the stories, secret chambers, forgotten rooms. Most of it's nonsense, but not all." Scorpius smirked. "So, treasure hunting?" "Something like that," said Longbottom, shouldering his satchel, "except the treasure may try to hex us back." They descended together into the depths, torches flickering as the air grew cooler and damp. The walls glistened faintly, and somewhere far off, water dripped in a slow, steady rhythm. Alara walked ahead, every step echoing in her chest. She felt it again, the subtle hum of power buried but awake. When they reached the corridor of the silver-veined wall, her heart nearly stopped. The others gasped softly. "What is this place?" Amara whispered. Scorpius ran a hand over the carvings. "The Founder's sigils, but I've never seen them arranged like this." Longbottom frowned, lighting his wand. "No mention of this in any record I've read." Alara's hand trembled slightly as she pointed. "There. Do you see? The silver veins? They pulse." As if responding to her words, the veins flared faintly. The magic stirred again, alive. Longbottom stepped closer. "It's reacting to us. Stand back." He raised his wand, murmured a revealing charm, but the moment the spell touched the wall, the torchlight in the corridor flickered wildly. The air split with a deep, vibrating sound that seemed to come from the stone itself. Then, just as suddenly, silence. Longbottom staggered back, breathing hard. "Merlin's beard. That was powerful. We'll need help from the Department of Mysteries before we..." He stopped. The wall was changing. Slowly, the silver veins coalesced into letters, ancient runes that shimmered faintly. Alara read them aloud, half in awe, half in fear. Here lies the heart of magic unbound. Touch not the threshold, lest the world remember its first breath. A shiver ran through the group. Scorpius stepped closer despite himself. What does it mean? The heart of magic? Longbottom's face was pale. It means this predates Hogwarts, maybe even the founders themselves. Alara felt the heartbeat again, faint, echoing through the stone. It was calling to her. She didn't know what compelled her, but she reached out once more. The moment her fingertips brushed the silver, the world tilted. The air roared around her and light flared like the birth of a star. Then everything went black. When she came to, she was lying on the cold stone floor. Longbottom was shouting her name. Scorpius and Amara knelt beside her, faces white. "Ilara, can you hear me?" She nodded weakly. Her hands still glowed silver. "The wall," Amara whispered. It spoke." Alara turned her head. The sigils now shone faintly, and from the cracks between them drifted a thin mist that shimmered like moonlight. And beneath it all, faint but clear, came a voice, ancient, patient, and terrible. "The seal is broken. The limit remembers." The mist swirled once, then sank back into the wall. Silence reclaimed the corridor. Longbottom rose slowly. "We're leaving. Now." They did not argue. As they made their way back toward the torch-lit stairs, Alara glanced once over her shoulder. The wall stood quiet again, the runes fading to dull gray. Yet deep within, she felt the echo of that heartbeat. It was awake now, and it knew her name. And far above them, the enchanted ceiling of the great hall flickered once more. The storm clouds began to gather again. By the following morning, Hogwarts was no longer the same. The torches along the corridors burned low and sputtering, their light unsteady. Books whispered when opened, and staircases shifted without warning, as though the castle itself were restless. Even the ghosts glided through the halls more swiftly than usual, their pale faces drawn with unease. Alara could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the wall, heard the ancient voice murmuring through the stone. "The seal is broken. The limit remembers." Those words echoed in her mind like a curse. She sat at the window of the Ravenclaw Tower, watching dawn creep over the forbidden forest. Below, the lake reflected the sky like molten glass. She noticed something strange. The giant squid, which usually floated lazily near the surface, was gone. The water lay still and silent, save for a faint ripple spreading from the heart of its depths. By midday, whispers had begun to spread among the students. Spells were failing in potions, cauldrons exploding without cause, broomsticks refused to rise during flying practice. Even the portraits had gone quiet, listening for something they could not name. Professor Longbottom called them together in a small classroom near the greenhouse. His face was drawn, his usual warmth gone. Scorpius and Amara were already there, waiting. "I've reported everything to the headmistress." Longbottom began pacing before the hearth. "The wall you found, the voice, everything. The Department of Mysteries has been alerted. Until they arrive, you are not to go near that corridor again. Do you understand?" Alara nodded, though her mind rebelled at the command. The wall haunted her dreams. The heartbeat she'd felt through the stone now seemed to echo faintly inside her chest, as though a fragment of it had lodged within her. Scorpius leaned forward. "Professor, whatever that thing is, it's affecting the entire castle. It's not just a chamber, it's alive. Can't we at least study it?" Longbottom's expression darkened. You don't understand, Malfoy. That wasn't just an enchantment, it was a seal. One placed there long before even Salazar Slytherin carved his chamber. You may have disturbed something meant never to wake. The words struck like cold water. Alara looked down at her hands, still faintly silver, when the light caught them. Amara broke the silence. If the Department of Mysteries can't reach us in time, what happens then? Longbottom hesitated, then lowered his voice. Then we must rely on Hogwarts itself. The castle's wards are ancient. They may still protect us. But be alert. If you feel your magic behaving strangely, you come to me immediately. He dismissed them, but Alara lingered at the doorway. Professor, she whispered, what is the limit? He turned slowly, eyes grave. Old stories speak of a time when magic was new and wild, when wizards had no need for wands or words. They say a boundary was drawn then to contain the chaos and give form to magic. The limit was that boundary, a living power, if you believe the legends. And if it remembers, Longbottom's voice dropped to a whisper, then the boundary may begin to fade. That night, the castle trembled. Alara was woken by a deep rumbling that shook the very bed beneath her. Screams echoed from distant corridors. She seized her wand and raced into the hall, joining a flood of panicked students. The staircases groaned, shifting wildly as torches flared blue. Through the chaos came the booming voice of McGonagall, magnified by magic. All students to the Great Hall. Prefects, lead your houses. By the time Alara reached the hall, the ceiling above was filled with roiling storm clouds, crackling with violet lightning. Professors hurried between the tables, calming frightened children. McGonagall stood at the dais, her expression ironclad. The wards have faltered in the eastern wing, she announced. We believe a surge of magic has disrupted the castle's protections. No one is to leave the Great Hall until further notice. But even as she spoke, the massive doors behind Alara groaned open. A gust of cold wind swept through, extinguishing half the candles. A figure stood framed in the doorway, a man in dark, travel-worn robes, his face lined with exhaustion. In his hand gleamed a wand marked with strange runes. Director Luthen, McGonagall said sharply, you arrived sooner than expected. The stranger bowed slightly. The Ministry's readings were correct. A source of uncontrolled magic has awakened beneath this school. His eyes scanned the crowd until they fell on Alara. He froze. You? He said softly. You touched it? Alara felt every gaze in the hall turn toward her. How do you... she began, but Luthen cut her off. Your aura bears the mark. Silver resonance. The same signature we found at the site of the breach. Whatever lies below has bound itself to you. Murmurs swept through the hall. McGonagall's expression tightened. Director, this is a student. You will mind your tone. I mean her no harm, he said, but she may be the key to sealing what has been undone. The limit stirs, Headmistress. If it awakens fully, magic itself could unravel. The storm above the ceiling gave a low, ominous growl. Later that night, Alara found herself in the headmistress's office once more. Luthen stood beside McGonagall, tracing symbols in the air that shimmered faintly. The portraits of former headmasters watched in uneasy silence. This mark cannot be removed, Luthen said. It is a bond, a tether between her and the entity below. We might use it to trace the heart of the disturbance, but if the bond strengthens, the creature may use her as a vessel. Alara's pulse quickened. You mean it could control me? Not yet, said Luthen. But the more it remembers, the more power it will seek. We must act quickly. McGonagall's lips thinned. What do you propose? We descend again, Luthen said simply. To the place of the seal, the child comes with us. No, McGonagall said at once. She's a student, not a pawn in your experiments. With respect, headmistress, said Luthen, his eyes flicking to Alara. The limit has already chosen her. Without her, the seal cannot be restored. The room fell into heavy silence. Alara stood very still. She felt the silver light pulsing faintly under her skin, like a heartbeat she could not silence. Deep inside, something ancient stirred, a whisper brushing her thoughts. The world has forgotten me, it murmured. But you remember, you opened the gate. She clenched her fists, fighting the voice back. I'll go, she said at last. McGonagall turned sharply. Miss Byrne, if it's my fault, then I have to help fix it, she said. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. After a long pause, the headmistress nodded grimly. Very well, but you will not go alone. Before dawn, a small group gathered at the base of the moving staircases. Ilara, Scorpius, Amara, Professor Longbottom, and Director Luthen. Their wands cast long, shifting shadows upon the stone. Without a word, they descended into the depths of Hogwarts once more. The deeper they went, the colder it grew. The air shimmered faintly, as though charged with invisible current. When at last they reached the corridor of the wall, Alara's breath caught. The sigils no longer slept. They glowed steadily now, and from the cracks seeped a faint silver mist that curled like smoke. Luthen stepped forward. The seal is weakening. Stand ready. He began to chant in low, rhythmic tones. The runes along his wand flared, casting blue light across the chamber. The wall responded with a low hum, deep and resonant. But then, without warning, the mist surged outward, rising in a twisting column that filled the air. From within it came a voice vast and echoing, neither male nor female, but older than time. Why do you bind what was never meant to be bound? Luthen shouted, Hold the formation! The mist coalesced into shape, something immense and formless, its edges flickering between light and shadow. Eyes opened within it, vast and silver. Ilara felt its attention turn toward her. You freed me, child of will and curiosity. Now you would cage me again? She raised her wand with trembling hands. You're destroying the castle. Not destroying, the voice murmured. Restoring. Magic was never meant to be contained. The ground shook violently. Stones cracked. Dust fell from the ceiling. Luthen shouted another spell, forcing the mist back. But the entity only laughed, a sound like wind tearing through mountains. Alara's silver-lit hands flared brighter. A thread of energy arced between her and the creature binding them. She gasped, falling to her knees. Through the pain, she heard its whisper again. Come deeper. Only there can the seal be mended, or broken. And then the wall split apart once more, revealing the dark beyond. The limit had called her, and this time it would not be denied. The air that poured from the opening was colder than the grave. It carried with it a scent of stone long buried, and the faint echo of voices that had not been heard for centuries. The wall of the Founders had split wide once more, its silver light pulsing like a living heart. Alara stood at the threshold, her wand raised, her breath quick and shallow. The creature, the limit, hovered in the air before her, vast and formless. Its eyes burned with shifting light, neither fire nor ice, and when it spoke, the walls trembled. Enter, child of mortal craft. You sought me, and so I awoke. Now you will see what lies beyond the bounds of your kind. Luthen's voice broke the silence, sharp and commanding. Ilara, step back. That passage hasn't been opened in 1,000 years. It could collapse at any moment. But the limit's words struck deeper than warning. They reached into her mind, winding through her thoughts like threads of silver. She could feel it tugging, urging her forward, whispering promises of knowledge beyond measure. Her wand light flickered. "Professor Longbottom," she whispered, "I have to go." "You'll do no such thing." Longbottom barked, striding toward her, but the moment his boot crossed the threshold, a surge of force struck him back, as though the air itself had turned to stone. He hit the wall hard, winded but alive. The creature's laughter rolled through the chamber like thunder. "Only the bound may pass. The rest must wait." "Ilara!" Amara shouted, but Ilara barely heard her. The silver glow beneath her skin was burning brighter now, spreading up her arms like molten light. She took a single step forward, and the world shifted. The stone beneath her feet gave way to darkness, swallowing her whole. When Ilara opened her eyes again, she was no longer in the dungeons. She stood upon a vast plain of shimmering light that stretched as far as the eye could see. The sky above was not a sky at all, but a swirling canopy of magic. Ribbons of blue, gold, and crimson twisting like living smoke. The ground beneath her shimmered as though it were made of pure magic made solid, and there at the center of this endless expanse stood a figure. It was tall and indistinct, wrapped in robes that shifted through colors like reflections on water. Its face was hidden, but its voice was the same deep, echoing tone she'd heard in the darkness. "You stand within the veil between," it said, "where magic is neither formed nor formless, the place from which all spells are born." Ilara took a hesitant step forward. "You're the limit." "I am that which your kind named so," the being replied. "Once I gave shape to your power. I showed the first witches and wizards how to control what could not be contained. But they feared me. They sealed me beneath their stone fortress and forgot my name." "Because you were dangerous," Ilara said, though her voice wavered. "Because magic needs limits. Without them it destroys everything." The creature tilted its head as though considering her. "Does a river destroy the land when it flows? Or is it your walls that make the flood?" Ilara's grip tightened on her wand. "You don't understand the castle, our world. It's breaking because of you." "No," the limit murmured. "It breaks because it has forgotten how to breathe. You've caged what should be free. Every charm, every incantation, chains upon chains." It stepped closer, and Ilara felt the air grow heavy, her heartbeat slowing to match the deep rhythm she'd heard beneath the castle. "But you," it whispered, "you reached beyond. You touched me. You can unmake the seal or restore it. Choose, and I will obey." Her mind spun. Restore the seal, and perhaps Hogwarts would be saved. Unmake it, and she could release the wild heart of magic itself, something no wizard had ever done. "Why me?" she breathed. "Why choose me?" "Because you dared," the limit said simply, "and because within you lies a spark that remembers what magic once was." Before she could reply, the light around her began to tremble. The endless plain rippled like water struck by a stone. Through the shimmer, she saw faint shapes, faces she knew, reaching toward her from the waking world. "Ilara!" It was Scorpius, his voice distant but desperate. "If you can hear us, fight it. You're not alone." The vision of the limit flickered, its form wavering. "They pull you back, but you cannot remain half in and half out. Choose, or both worlds will fall. The ground split open beneath her feet, revealing a chasm of blinding light. In its depths swirled memories, not hers, but the world's. The first spark of wand light, the first whispered spell, the first fear that magic might one day devour its masters. Alara's heart pounded. She could feel her body back in the dungeon, could hear Luthen shouting spells to contain the tremors. The Limit's voice thundered around her once more, "Choose!" And then something within her broke free. She thought of the castle, the laughter in the corridors, the warmth of the fires, the lives intertwined by the magic that lived in every stone. She thought of her friends, of McGonagall standing proud before frightened students, of Longbottom's courage, of the wonder she'd felt the first time she held a wand. "I choose to protect them," she whispered. She raised her wand high, its light burning brighter than the stars above. "By the will of Hogwarts, by the heart of its founders, I restore the seal." The plane erupted in light. The Limit screamed, a sound of rage and sorrow intertwined, and its form shattered into 1,000 shards of silver that spun around her like snow. The light consumed everything. When Alara's eyes opened again, she was lying on the cold floor of the dungeon. Her friends surrounded her, Longbottom, Amara, Scorpius, and Luthen, all pale with worry. The wall of the Founders was whole once more, its sigils dark and silent. The silver veins no longer pulsed. "She's breathing," Amara whispered in relief. Alara sat up slowly, her body aching as though she had run for miles. The silver glow was gone from her hands. The air around them felt still, too still. "Is it over?" Scorpius asked quietly. Luthen was staring at the wall. "Yes," he said at last. "The seal holds again. Whatever was stirring beneath is silent." He turned to Alara, his voice softer. "You did it. You restored the boundary." But Alara wasn't sure. The heartbeat she had always felt in the stone was gone. No hum, no pulse, only silence. She rose unsteadily, gazing at the sigils. "What happens now?" Luthen looked at her gravely. "Now the world sleeps again, and perhaps this time it will not wake." Yet as they turned to leave the chamber, Alara glanced back once more. For the briefest moment, the raven's sigil shimmered faintly. Just a flicker of silver light, and from somewhere deep beneath Hogwarts, faint as a sigh, came a whisper only she could hear. "Limits are but doors, Alara Byrne, and all doors open, in time." The days that followed were hushed and uneasy. Hogwarts, though outwardly unchanged, seemed quieter than ever before. The castle's magic had steadied, the torches burned true again, and the sky above the enchanted ceiling returned to its ordinary splendor of drifting clouds and starlight. Yet beneath it all lingered a silence not of peace but of waiting. Alara Byrne moved through the corridors like one half lost between waking and dream. She attended her lessons, answered her professors, even smiled when spoken to, but her thoughts were elsewhere, buried deep beneath the stone floor where she had stood before the Limit and bound it once more. At night she dreamed of silver light and endless plains. She woke with her hand pressed to her heart, feeling the phantom echo of that vast power. It was as if something in her had been marked forever by what she had seen. Scorpius Malfoy noticed before anyone else. One afternoon in the library, while Amara hunted through a pile of dusty tomes for any mention of the Limit, he leaned close across the table and whispered, "You're quieter than usual, Byrne. That's saying something." Alara looked up from the parchment she'd been scribbling on. Just tired. You're lying, he said mildly. Your eyes go distant every time the castle creaks. You're waiting for it to start again. She hesitated. What if I didn't seal it properly? What if it's only sleeping? He smirked faintly, though there was no real amusement in it. Then I suppose you'd better hope we all get a decent night's rest before it wakes. Amara shot him a warning look. Enough, Scorpius. She turned to Alara, her expression kind. You did what no one else could. The headmistress said herself that the magical fields are stable now. You saved Hogwarts. Alara smiled weakly. That's what they keep saying. But that night she woke to the sound of whispers. They were faint at first, so faint she thought she was dreaming. But as she sat up, the voices grew clearer, echoing through the stone walls. Beyond the seal, beyond the seal. She stumbled from her bed, heart hammering. The common room was empty, its blue fire burning low. The whispers came from below, from the very foundations. Alara hesitated only a moment before snatching up her wand. She had promised herself she would never return to the dungeons, yet something compelled her. Perhaps it was curiosity again, or perhaps something deeper, older, tugging at the silver scar that seemed to sleep within her veins. The castle was silent as she descended. Every step echoed, every breath seemed too loud. The staircases did not move for her this time, as though the castle itself watched in wary silence. When she reached the low corridors beneath the Slytherin dungeons, the air grew colder. Frost rimed the stones, and her breath misted before her. The hum she had felt once before, the pulse of the limit, was gone, but in its absence she felt a void, an emptiness that drew her onward. The wall of the Founders stood ahead, dark and still. The sigils were cold. She exhaled, her wand light trembling. If you can hear me, she whispered, show me. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the raven's sigil flickered faintly, like a dying ember. A single word whispered through her mind. Below. She frowned. Below? Below what? The floor shifted beneath her feet. With a grinding of stone, a hidden stairwell opened at the base of the wall, spiraling down into darkness. Cold air rushed upward, carrying the scent of ancient earth and magic long buried. Alara hesitated, but only for a breath. She raised her wand and began to descend. The staircase seemed endless. As she descended, the walls changed. No longer the rough-cut stone of the castle, but smooth, pale marble etched with runes that glowed faintly blue. Symbols of the Founders appeared in sequence, but others, older, stranger, intertwined among them. At last, the stair ended in a vast cavern, the ceiling arched high overhead, studded with crystals that shimmered with pale light. At the center of the cavern stood an altar carved from obsidian, and upon it rested a single sphere of pure glass. Inside the sphere swirled a faint mist, silver and gold and alive. Alara approached slowly, her heart pounding. The whispers grew louder now, surrounding her from every side. The heart of magic, the source. She reached out. Her fingers brushed the glass, and in an instant, the cavern blazed with light. She stood once again within the veil between, but it was different this time. The sky of swirling magic was cracked. Streams of light poured through fissures like bleeding stars. The ground trembled beneath her, and from the broken horizon a figure approached, familiar, vast, and filled with terrible grace. You bound me, the limit said, its voice both sorrowful and accusing, but you did not heal the wound. Alara shook her head. You told me to choose. I chose to protect my world. You chose half of truth, the being murmured. The boundary holds, yet the balance falters. Magic must flow or it dies. Already your world weakens. You feel it, do you not? She thought of the castle's silence, the way spells had grown faint, the chill that crept even into the fires of the great hall. What do you want from me? She asked. The limit extended a hand of light. Within its palm flickered the same sphere she had seen upon the altar. This is the core of the seal. If it fades, magic will wither. But to restore it fully, something must be given, something bound to the world as I am. Her throat tightened. You mean me? You carry my mark, said the limit. You alone may bear the burden. To restore the flow, you must become its vessel. She felt the truth of it before it finished speaking. The silver light within her, the connection she'd forged when she touched the wall. It had not been severed, only dormant. She could give herself to the magic, become its living bridge. But the price would be her life as she knew it. She would no longer walk among her friends, nor live within time's flow. She would become part of the castle itself, a guardian, unseen but eternal. Alara's hands trembled. There must be another way. There's always another way, the limit said softly, but not always a better one. The light around her dimmed. She saw flashes, visions of Hogwarts as it might become, its walls crumbling, its enchantments fading, children standing in corridors where no torches burned. She saw a world without magic, quiet, empty, gray. And she saw another vision, the castle aglow once more, its heart strong, the laughter of generations echoing through the halls. Her choice was clear, and yet it broke her heart. She took a step toward the limit. If I do this, will they remember me? The being tilted its head, not in name, but in wonder. A tear slid down her cheek. Then let it be enough. She reached for the sphere. The moment her fingers closed around it, the light surged upward, swallowing everything. Pain and power and peace flooded through her all at once. The limit's voice faded into silence. When the light died, the cavern was empty. The altar stood bare. Far above in the great hall, the torches flared brighter. The stones of the castle seemed to breathe again, their warmth returning. Students awoke from uneasy sleep to find the air filled with a faint shimmer of silver dust. Professor McGonagall, standing by her window, felt a pulse through the floor, steady, strong, alive. In the dungeons, the wall of the Founders glowed softly. The raven's sigil shone brightest, its wings spread wide, and from deep within the stone, faint as a heartbeat, came a whisper. Hogwarts endures. By morning they found the staircase behind the wall gone, sealed as though it had never existed. The records would later say that Alara Byrne vanished during the disturbances that year, no trace left behind. But sometimes, on still nights, when the torches burn a little brighter and the corridors hum with unseen energy, students swear they hear a voice in the wind, a girl's voice calm and clear. Stay curious, it says. Magic remembers. And the castle listens. The winter that followed Alara Byrne's disappearance came early and hard. Snow fell thick over the highlands, blanketing the castle's turrets and battlements in white. The forbidden forest glittered like a realm of frozen glass, and the black lake lay sealed beneath a layer of ice, so clear it mirrored the gray sky above. But within Hogwarts, warmth returned. The torches burned steadily again, and the enchantments that had flickered for weeks now held strong. Spells sang through the halls with their old certainty, and for a time it seemed as though peace had been restored. Yet peace in Hogwarts was never so simple. Professor Neville Longbottom still woke in the night to the memory of the silver light and the trembling floor. He often found himself wandering the dungeons where the wall of the Founders stood silent. No door had opened there since that night, but sometimes he thought he heard faint echoes, soft whispers threading through the stones. Headmistress McGonagall, too, felt the change. The castle was alive again, yes, but its heartbeat was different. Stronger, older, more deliberate. The portraits muttered among themselves, and even the ghosts moved as if listening for something unseen. And in the Tower of Ravenclaw, the room that had once been Alara's remained untouched. Her books were stacked neatly upon her desk, her quill lying across an unfinished essay on the properties of living enchantments. The silver ink had dried mid-sentence. Scorpius Malfoy visited often, though he told no one. He would sit upon the windowsill overlooking the lake, watching the ice catch the moonlight. Once he thought he saw a shimmer of movement beneath it, a flicker of silver light, tracing the lake's dark depths. He said nothing of it. Not to Amara, not even to Longbottom. Some secrets, he thought, were too strange to be spoken aloud. It was in early February when the next disturbance came. It began with the portraits. They stopped talking. One by one, the paintings that lined the corridors fell silent, their subjects frozen mid-gesture, their eyes glassy and blank. Then came the staircases. They moved more slowly, groaning as though burdened. The ghosts flickered like lanterns in a wind. By nightfall, the castle's air hummed again with that same deep vibration Neville remembered all too well. He went straight to McGonagall's office, his breath misting in the cold corridor. She was already waiting, standing before the fire with her wand drawn. "It's happening again," she said without turning. "Yes," Neville answered grimly, "but it's different this time. The wards aren't weakening, they're shifting, as though something inside them is alive." The headmistress turned. "Alive?" He hesitated, almost like they're responding. As if in answer, the flames in the hearth flickered blue. McGonagall stiffened. The portraits upon her wall, the old headmasters and headmistresses who had watched for centuries, suddenly stirred. Phineas Nigellus Black was the first to speak. "She's not gone," he murmured, his painted eyes gleaming. "The girl who vanished, the one who sealed it?" McGonagall's brow furrowed. "Alara Byrne? What do you mean?" Before the portrait could answer, every painting in the office spoke at once, a chorus of voices overlapping in confusion and awe. "She walks the halls. The castle moves through her. The guardian wakes." And then silence again. Neville stepped forward, staring at the now still portraits. "Guardian?" he whispered. McGonagall's gaze turned toward the window, where snow fell thick against the glass. "If the castle has a guardian," she said softly, "then it seems she has decided to make herself known." The following evening, Scorpius and Amara were walking the long corridor that led toward the astronomy tower when the temperature dropped suddenly. Their breath fogged the air, and frost bloomed across the stone walls in intricate, spiraling patterns. Scorpius raised his wand. "Lumos!" The light illuminated something standing at the end of the passage. A figure. She was faint, almost transparent, yet perfectly clear in outline. A girl in Ravenclaw robes, her hair lifted by an unseen breeze, her eyes shone silver. "Ilara," Amara whispered. The ghostly figure turned her head. The light around her shimmered like starlight through mist. Amara, she said softly. Her voice was the same, though it carried the echo of something vast and distant. Scorpius, you shouldn't be here. He took a step forward. You're alive. Merlin, you're... She shook her head gently. Not alive. Not as you are. I am part of Hogwarts now. Its guardian, its keeper. I can feel everything, the heartbeat of every spell, the breath of every flame. Amara's eyes filled with tears. We thought you were gone. I was, Ilara said, her voice quiet and calm. But magic needed balance. The limit sleeps again, but it must be watched. It must be guided. She looked past them toward the shadows stretching down the corridor. Something stirs beyond the castle. I feel a pull, a breach forming far to the north. Scorpius frowned. Beyond Hogwarts? She nodded. The seal does not end here. The founders built more than walls. They built chains across the world. If one weakens, the rest will follow. Before they could speak again, her form flickered. The light dimmed. Ilara, wait, Scorpius called. Her voice drifted back, faint and distant. Tell them the limit dreams again, and when it wakes, the world will remember its beginning. Then she was gone. By dawn, the castle was alive with rumor. Dozens of students claimed to have seen her. A silver apparition gliding through the halls, her footsteps silent, her eyes bright as stars. Some said she passed through walls, others that she mended broken charms with a single touch. Professor Flitwick swore that when one of the great chandeliers fell in the great hall, it stopped midair, suspended by invisible hands, before rising gently back to its place. The professors gathered that evening in McGonagall's office. Luthen, the unspeakable, had returned from the ministry, his face grave. I warned you, he said quietly. When one binds themselves to raw magic, they do not die. They become part of the flow, but the flow does not rest forever. McGonagall folded her hands. You believe Miss Burns' spirit remains tied to the castle? Spirit? Luthen echoed. No, headmistress. What walks your halls is not a ghost. It is magic itself, wearing her memory. Neville's jaw tightened. Then we must find a way to reach her, to remind her who she was. Luthen gave him a sorrowful glance. You cannot remind the river of its source, Professor. You can only follow where it leads. A low rumble shook the floor. The flames in the hearth flared silver, and from the stones came a faint whisper, so soft it might have been imagination. The limit stirs. That night, snow swept across the grounds, swirling in great gusts over the frozen lake. Deep beneath its surface, silver light pulsed once, twice, then faded. Far to the north, beyond the mountains that framed the school, an ancient ruin lay buried beneath centuries of ice. And within that ruin, cracks began to form, spreading across walls marked by the same 4 sigils that graced the chamber beneath Hogwarts. A faint hum filled the frozen air, rising like a distant song. Back within the castle, the students slept uneasily. The torches flickered, their flames bending as though drawn toward the north, and in the silence of the Ravenclaw Tower, where moonlight touched the old desk of Ilara Byrne, the quill she had left behind stirred once. Its tip glowed silver, and in graceful, unseen hands, it began to write. The seal weakens, the dream continues, the limit remembers. Then the ink dried, and the castle fell silent once more. The northern winds grew fiercer with each passing week, clawing at the towers of Hogwarts until the very stones groaned in protest. Snow drifted higher than the gates, and the sky never seemed to brighten past a dull, wintry gray. The great hall burned with twice its usual fires, but the students huddled closer nonetheless, uneasy and sleepless. A tension had settled over the castle, a quiet foreboding that no spell could warm away. Rumors had reached the staff from far beyond the castle walls. Strange disturbances were spreading through the wizarding world. Spells that failed without cause, enchanted artifacts that cracked or turned against their owners, entire wards collapsing in places where magic had held for centuries. The ministry's records called it the fading, and every night that same pulse of power stirred faintly through Hogwarts, like a heartbeat deep within the rock. Headmistress McGonagall stood by the high windows of her office one evening, her hands clasped behind her back. The portraits watched in tense silence. Snow flurried outside, blurring the distant lights of Hogsmeade. "They say the northern seals are breaking," said a quiet voice behind her. It was Professor Longbottom, his face pale in the lamplight. Durmstrang sent word. Their wards flicker like candle flames. McGonagall's expression hardened. "Then it begins." Longbottom frowned. "You think it's her?" The headmistress turned slowly, her gaze sharp as ever. "Not her. It. The limit. Ilara Byrne bought us time, but time was never a cure. Whatever she bound beneath this castle was part of a greater whole, and that whole is waking." The fire flickered blue for a heartbeat, and McGonagall's eyes softened. "I wonder, though, if she yet walks these halls, perhaps there is still hope." Longbottom hesitated. "You think she could stop it again? Or guide us?" said McGonagall quietly. "The castle remembers her." Down in the Slytherin common room, Scorpius Malfoy sat before the green glowing hearth, staring into the flames. Around him, his classmates whispered in hushed voices, but he barely heard them. The image of Ilara, silver-eyed, spectral, and calm, haunted his thoughts. When he closed his eyes, he could still hear her last words. "The limit dreams again." He rose suddenly, ignoring the curious glances that followed him, and slipped out into the corridor. The dungeons were cold and damp, but he knew where he was going. The wall of the Founders had remained sealed since that night, yet some instinct told him it would not remain so for long. He was not the only one who thought so. As he turned a corner, a wand light flashed ahead. "Scorpius?" came a familiar voice. Amara Patel stepped into view, wrapped in her cloak. "I thought I'd find you down here." He managed a wry smile. "You always do." She frowned. "Don't. This isn't the time." Her eyes were dark with worry. "You felt it, didn't you? The pulse." He nodded. "It's getting stronger. I think the wall's waking up again." Amara hesitated, then lowered her voice. "What if she's calling us?" He blinked. "Ilara? She told us before, when the seals weaken, the limit reaches out through her. If she's still part of the castle, maybe she's trying to warn us." They exchanged a long, heavy glance. Then, without another word, they moved together down the corridor. The air grew colder with every step. When they reached the chamber, the walls stood gleaming faintly, the silver veins alive once more. The 4 sigils, lion, serpent, badger, and raven, burned with a steady light. A whisper rippled through the air. "You came," Amara gasped softly. "Ilara." Her voice came from nowhere and everywhere, woven through the stone itself. "The north weakens. The seals fall one by one. The limit stirs, and with it the world remembers what it was before magic had boundaries." Scorpius stepped closer to the wall. "Tell us what to do." There was silence for a heartbeat. Then the light brightened, forming the faint outline of a face within the stone. Alara's face, serene and distant. "Go north, find the next seal. Hogwarts cannot hold alone. The chains must be restored before the limit wakes." Amara's eyes widened. "You mean the Founders' seals? They're real? More than myths?" Alara's form flickered. 4 anchors were placed when the world was young, one beneath each great stronghold of magic, Hogwarts, Beauxbatons, Durmstrang, and a 4th long forgotten beneath the northern wastes. When one breaks, the others strain. The last still holds, but not for long. The chamber shook gently, dust falling from the ceiling. "You must find it," she whispered. "The forgotten one, the first seal. Only there can the chain be reforged." The silver light dimmed. The sigils faded. Amara turned to Scorpius, her breath quick. "She's sending us away from the castle." He nodded slowly. "To the north." "But that's suicide," Amara whispered. "The mountains beyond Durmstrang are frozen wastelands. The Ministry would never allow." Scorpius smiled faintly. "Then we won't ask them?" The next morning, snow still falling thick upon the grounds, Scorpius and Amara stood at the edge of the lake, cloaked and ready. They had told no one, not even Longbottom. To speak of Alara's message was to invite delay, and every hour mattered. The forbidden forest loomed dark behind them, its trees heavy with frost. The ice of the lake shimmered faintly with that same silver sheen they had seen once before, but now it seemed calm, waiting. "Are you sure about this?" Amara asked quietly. Scorpius looked toward the distant hills. "No, but if Alara's right, this may be the only way to save everything she gave herself for." Before she could answer, the lake stirred. A ripple spread across the ice, widening into a circle. Then from the depths below, something vast rose, a massive, spectral shape, its eyes bright as lanterns, the giant squid. But it was changed, its form translucent, its body rimmed in silver light. One tentacle reached toward the shore and stopped just before them. Amara's voice was barely a whisper. "It's offering us passage." Scorpius grinned despite himself. "Hogwarts is lending us a hand." They stepped onto the frozen surface. The tentacle curled gently around them, lowering them toward a faint shimmer in the ice, a portal of pale light swirling slowly open. As the lake swallowed them in silver radiance, Scorpius caught a last glimpse of the castle's towers, fading into the storm. And in the highest window of the Ravenclaw Tower, he thought he saw her, Alara, shining faintly, her hand raised in farewell. When the light faded, they stood upon a snow-covered ridge beneath a vast, violet sky. Mountains rose jagged around them, and the air burned with cold so sharp it felt like shards of glass. Far below, in a valley choked with ice, stood the ruins of what must once have been a fortress. 4 broken towers jutted from the snow, their stones carved with the same ancient sigils that adorned Hogwarts' deepest chamber. Amara stared, awed. The 4th seal. Scorpius drew his wand, its light flickering pale in the wind. "Then let's hope we're not too late." A low tremor rolled through the ground. Snow shifted from the cliffs above, cascading down in thunderous waves. From beneath the ice, something vast began to move. Amara grasped his arm, her eyes wide with horror. "It's already waking." And from the heart of the frozen ruin, a light as bright as the moon burst upward, silver and alive. The Limit's dream had reached the north. The wind howled through the mountains like a living thing, sharp and cold enough to cut through their cloaks. Scorpius and Amara stood upon the ridge, staring down at the ruin below, where the light rose from the ice, silver, shifting, alive. It pulsed with the slow rhythm of a heartbeat, brightening and dimming as if breathing. "This is it," Scorpius said, his voice roughened by the cold. "The fourth seal." Amara's breath misted in the freezing air. "If it's truly waking, then the world might unravel before we reach it." He turned to her, his gray eyes calm but resolute. "Then we'd better move quickly." They descended the slope, boots sinking deep into the snow. Each step brought them closer to the ruin, a vast circular fortress half buried beneath centuries of frost. The walls were carved with strange curling runes, now cracked and faded, but still faintly glowing beneath the layers of ice. The air itself shimmered faintly, thick with magic that felt ancient and raw, far older than Hogwarts. As they crossed into the shadow of the broken towers, the world grew unnaturally still. Even the wind hushed. Only the faint throb of the light remained, beating like a hidden heart. "Do you feel that?" Amara whispered. Scorpius nodded. "Like the air's listening." They reached what had once been a grand archway, its keystone marked with the intertwined sigils of the founders. Beneath it the ice opened into a tunnel sloping downward, where silver mist coiled and drifted like breath. At the tunnel's mouth lay a figure. It was a man frozen in the ice, his wand still raised. His robes were ancient, robes of deep blue marked with a crest neither of them recognized. The ice around him shimmered faintly, with runes that pulsed in rhythm with the light below. "Who is he?" Amara murmured, kneeling beside the frozen shape. Scorpius brushed frost from the man's sleeve. The letters of his name gleamed faintly beneath the ice. "Orion." "The first warden," Scorpius breathed. "He must have been the guardian of this seal." Before Amara could answer, the ground trembled. The runes along the frozen man's body flared and cracks spread through the ice. The sound was like glass shattering underwater. Then his eyes opened. They glowed with pale blue fire. Both students stumbled back, wands raised as the figure's chest rose for the first time in centuries. With a sound like cracking thunder, the ice burst away, scattering in shards. The man fell to his knees, gasping as though surfacing from drowning. His gaze lifted to them, and when he spoke, his voice echoed with both age and power. "You bear the mark of Hogwarts," he said, the last bastion still bound. Scorpius lowered his wand slightly. "We came because the seals are failing. The limit is waking again." The man's expression darkened. "Then the age has come at last." He rose, leaning heavily on his wand. "I am Orion of the First Circle, the last of the wardens. We built the seals when the world was young, when the wild magic first threatened to tear creation apart." Amara stepped forward. "Then you can help us restore them?" Orion shook his head slowly. "No one can restore what was never meant to last. The seals were not made to imprison, but to balance. Every 1,000 years, the cycle returns. The magic tests its bounds, and someone must stand in the breach." His eyes glimmered faintly. "Your Alara Byrne stands there now." "Alara?" Scorpius asked sharply. "She's alive?" "In a manner of speaking," Orion said. "She is bound to the core of Hogwarts, her spirit woven into its walls. But that link draws her ever closer to the limit's will. If she falters, the boundary will shatter entirely." A shudder passed through the earth, and the silver light below surged brighter, illuminating the cavern walls. From the depths came a low, rolling sound, half wind, half voice. "The seals fall, the river flows, Orion's face hardened. It is calling. We have little time. He turned toward the tunnel leading deeper underground, motioning for them to follow. If we reach the heart before it fully wakes, we may yet strengthen the chain. Come. They plunged into the darkness, each wands casting pale circles of light upon the icy walls. The air grew warmer as they descended, the frost melting into mist. The walls shimmered faintly with veins of silver and gold, the same veins Alara had once touched beneath Hogwarts. At last, the passage widened into a vast chamber. At its center rose a pedestal of black stone, and upon it floated a sphere of liquid light, swirling like a captured storm. "The fourth seal," Orion whispered, "the heart of the northern chain." The air hummed with unbearable power. Amara could feel her magic prickling under her skin, like fire and frost at once. "What do we do?" she asked. Orion approached the pedestal. "We cannot reseal what is already breaking, but we can share its burden." Scorpius frowned. "Share it?" Orion looked back at him. Each seal was bound not only by spell work, but by life, by will. A guardian to lend strength to the chains. When one guardian falls, the balance must be renewed. That is why the castle called to you. You were chosen to replace what was lost. Amara's voice trembled. "You mean one of us?" The old wizard's eyes were sorrowful. "One must join the flow, or all will fall to chaos. Such has been the price since the first age." Before either could answer, the chamber shook violently. The silver sphere pulsed brighter, its light splitting into streams that lashed out like whips of lightning. The limit's voice filled the cavern, vast, echoing, ancient. "The world was mine before your kind gave it names. You cannot bind what does not wish to be bound." Orion shouted above the roar, "It senses us! The seal is breaking!" Scorpius and Amara raised their wands, casting shield charms as the magic tore at the air. Fragments of stone ripped free from the walls, swirling in a storm of light. The old wizard staggered, his robes whipping in the gale. He turned to them, his eyes burning fiercely. "Go! Tell your headmistress the seals must be joined through the living chain. Alara must complete the circle from Hogwarts. Now run!" "But what about you?" Amara cried. He gave her a weary smile. "I have stood watch too long. Let me hold this one last time." Before they could protest, he thrust his wand toward the heart of the seal. Light flared, blinding and white. His form dissolved into it, merging with the glowing sphere. The roar ceased. The air went still. Only the faint hum of the seal remained, steady and calm once more. Amara fell to her knees, breathing hard. "He's gone." Scorpius knelt beside her, his expression grave. "He bought us time." He glanced toward the tunnel. "We have to get back to Hogwarts. Alara is part of the circle. If she fails, all this will be for nothing." The ground trembled again, weaker now but insistent. A voice, Alara's voice, echoed faintly through the air. "The chain must hold. Come home." Scorpius met Amara's eyes. "Let's go." Together they turned and began the long climb back toward the surface, the faint silver glow following in their wake like a dying star. Far above them, in the depths of the storm, the northern lights flared brighter than they had in 1,000 years, green and silver and red, dancing like fire across the frozen sky. And deep beneath Hogwarts, where stone and magic breathed as one, the raven's sigil flickered. Alara Byrne's eyes opened once more. In the heart of winter, as snow cloaked the highlands in ghostly silence, Hogwarts dreamed. Its towers gleamed pale under the frozen moon, and its walls, though strong and ancient, trembled faintly, as though something vast stirred within their stones. The students went about their days as best they could, but every spell seemed heavier, slower, the air thick with unseen weight. In the headmistress's office, candles burned low. McGonagall stood beside the hearth, her hands clasped behind her back, while Professor Longbottom read aloud from a tattered letter, freshly arrived by Owl. "Durmstrang has fallen," he said, his voice quiet. "Their headmaster reports the northern seal shattered completely. The wards dissolved like mist. They've evacuated the school." McGonagall's jaw tightened. "And Beauxbaton?" "Still holding, but their enchantments flicker," said Longbottom. "They feel tremors beneath their grounds. Whatever's happening, it's spreading fast." The headmistress closed her eyes. "Then Orion's sacrifice bought us little time." Longbottom placed the letter aside. "We can't stop it alone. The castle's magic is alive, but it's restless. If the seals fail one by one, even Hogwarts will fall." McGonagall turned towards the great window that looked out over the lake. A faint shimmer moved beneath the ice, silver light pulsing faintly. "Perhaps not alone," she said softly. "If Alara truly endures within these walls, then she may yet show us the way." That night the storm returned. It rolled across the highlands with a fury unseen in a century. The windows of the castle rattled and thunder shook the towers from crown to root. In the Ravenclaw Tower the fire guttered and went out. For a long moment only the wind's voice filled the silence. Then from the ashes a faint light flickered, silver and soft. It spread along the floor, tracing the air like smoke until it formed the shape of a girl. Alara Byrne stood once more in her old dormitory, her figure translucent but bright. Her gaze turned to the window, where snow hurled itself against the glass. "The chain weakens," she murmured. "The last seal strains." Her voice echoed faintly through the stones. In answer, the castle groaned, a low, ancient sound. The magic in the air shivered. Far below in the dungeons, the wall of the Founders flared to life. The sigils glowed one by one, lion, serpent, badger, raven. The light pulsed outward like a signal, racing along the halls, up the staircases, through the very bones of the school. Every portrait stirred awake. The ghosts paused mid-flight. The enchanted suits of armor turned their heads as one. Alara's voice carried through them all. The chain must be complete, the circle unbroken. Miles away, beneath the blinding white of the northern snows, Scorpius and Amara fought their way through the storm. The path they had climbed only hours before was gone, swallowed by fresh drifts. The wind tore at their cloaks and stung their faces raw, but neither dared stop. "We can't apparate," Amara shouted over the gale. "The magic here's too unstable." "Then we walk," Scorpius yelled back. His wand glowed in his hand, casting weak light on the path ahead. "Hogwarts is calling. We have to reach it before the limit wakes." They pressed on through the endless white. The snow deepened, the air so cold it burned to breathe. And through it all, faint whispers followed them, voices carried on the wind. The circle must close." Hours, or perhaps days, passed before the mountains finally gave way to rolling hills. When the first glimpse of Hogwarts appeared through the storm, a faint outline of towers and light, they both nearly wept. But the castle was not as they had left it. Above its highest spire shimmered a vast column of light, spiraling skyward. The storm bent around it, lightning flashing within the beam. The magic within the castle pulsed outward in waves strong enough to shake the ground. "Hogwarts is awakening," Amara whispered. "No," said Scorpius, "she is." Inside the castle, the great hall was chaos. Professors shouted spells to hold the protective wards as the air cracked with bursts of uncontrolled energy. Students huddled beneath the tables, frightened. McGonagall stood at the center, wand raised high, her voice cutting through the storm. "Hold the line. Contain the surge." Longbottom ran toward her, his hair wild, snow melting on his shoulders. "The wards won't hold, Minerva. The limit's energy is bleeding through the very foundations." As if in answer, the floor trembled violently. A sound like a heartbeat echoed through the walls, deep and slow. The ceiling, enchanted to mirror the sky, flickered with blinding light. Then a voice spoke through the storm, clear, soft, and full of sorrow. "Headmistress." McGonagall turned sharply. At the far end of the hall stood Alara Byrne, glowing silver, her eyes luminous. The air stilled around her, and for a moment, even the storm seemed to pause in its fury. "Miss Byrne," McGonagall whispered. Alara bowed her head. "The last seal is failing. The magic that binds our world strains to contain its heart. The limit seeks release." Longbottom stepped forward. "Is there a way to stop it?" Alara looked toward the enchanted ceiling where light danced like fire. "There is a way, but it is not one that ends with peace." McGonagall's eyes narrowed. "Speak plainly." Alara's form flickered. "The seals were built to channel magic through living guardians. Each age must renew the bond. Orion gave his life to hold the northern seal. Now the chain demands another." The hall fell silent. "You mean," whispered Longbottom, "a sacrifice?" Alara met his gaze. "Not death, transformation. The guardian becomes the vessel of the chain, joining the flow so that the boundary endures. Once done, there is no return." McGonagall's hand tightened on her wand. "And who must bear it?" Alara's gaze turned toward the great doors of the hall. Snow burst inward, and through it came two figures, frozen, exhausted, but alive. Scorpius and Amara stumbled forward, their faces pale with cold. Alara's eyes softened. Them. The torches dimmed. A murmur ran through the hall. Scorpius straightened, meeting her gaze. "You called us here? We'll do whatever it takes." Amara took his hand, her voice trembling but steady. "If we are the link, then let us be it." Alara raised her wand, and light blossomed around them. "You understand the cost?" Scorpius nodded. "You once gave yourself for this castle. Now it's our turn." A deep hush fell. Even the portraits watched, breathless. Alara closed her eyes. The silver light within her brightened, spreading outward until it filled the hall. The very stones glowed. The heartbeat of the castle quickened. "Then so it shall be," she whispered. "Three to stand as one, past, present, and the magic between." She reached out, and her hand passed through theirs. For an instant, all three glowed. Alara's form blazing brightest, the silver light pouring from her into the two who stood before her. The storm outside roared. The light consumed everything. Then, as suddenly as it began, silence fell. When sight returned, Alara was gone. In her place stood Scorpius and Amara, their eyes shining faintly silver, their wands alight with a power neither had ever known. McGonagall stepped forward, awe softening her voice. "What have you done?" They looked up together, and when Scorpius spoke, his voice carried a note not entirely his own. "We have completed the circle. The chain holds again. The castle's walls sighed as if in relief. The torches flared back to life. The storm beyond the windows began to fade. Amara's gaze lifted to the enchanted ceiling, where the clouds parted to reveal a star-strewn sky. "She's still here," she said quietly. "Watching?" McGonagall nodded once, her stern expression breaking into something like pride. "Then Hogwarts endures." And from the highest tower, where moonlight fell upon the Ravenclaw window, a faint shimmer passed across the glass, a reflection of a girl's face, smiling before fading into the night. The limits slept once more, and the world of magic, for a time, knew peace. For many months after the storm broke and the light faded from the sky, Hogwarts lived in quiet peace. The snow melted from its roofs, spring returned to the valley, and the air grew once more filled with laughter and the chatter of students. The warping of spells ceased, the torches burned steady, and the castle seemed to sigh in relief, as though, after a long and terrible dream, it had finally awakened to calm. But beneath the surface, deep within the foundation, where earth and stone met ancient power, the heart of the school still glowed faintly with silver light. The seal was whole again. The chain of guardians, Orion, Ilara, Scorpius, and Amara, had reforged the boundary between magic and the wild. And yet, the castle's new heartbeat carried a different rhythm, as if three voices now whispered within the same breath. Professor Longbottom was the first to notice the change. While tending to the greenhouses one morning, he felt a soft pulse run through the soil. It was warm, almost like a greeting. The plants shivered in their pots, their leaves unfurling toward the sunlight, as if in silent acknowledgement. When he touched one of the roots, it hummed faintly in answer. Neville straightened slowly. "Well," he murmured, brushing dirt from his hands, "seems the castle's still talking." From that day on, small wonders began to unfold through the school. Broken quills repaired themselves overnight. The paintings in the great hall hummed tunes no one remembered teaching them. Once, a group of first years swore they'd seen silver footprints leading across the courtyard, glowing faintly before vanishing into the morning mist. Most chalked it up to ordinary Hogwarts enchantments. But McGonagall knew better. Late one evening, as the last of the students returned to their dormitories, she sat alone in her office, staring into the fire. Upon her desk lay a single parchment filled with the familiar, careful handwriting of Scorpius Malfoy. "Headmistress, the castle whispers when we walk the corridors. I think it knows we are part of it now. Amara and I dream the same dreams, fields of light, voices that call us by name. Sometimes I hear Ilara's laughter echo through the walls. We are not afraid, but the magic feels larger, as if the seal is no longer a cage, but a door. If that door ever opens again, promise me you will be ready." McGonagall folded the letter carefully. Her old hands trembled slightly as she placed it in a drawer beside the sorting hat. "Always too clever, the lot of them," she said quietly, "and far too brave." From the shadows above, the hat gave a slow, approving hum. "That's what makes them Hogwarts' children, isn't it?" Summer bloomed. The lake shimmered blue beneath the sun, and the castle's towers gleamed as though newly polished. But peace never lasts long in a world woven by magic. In late July, a group of ministry officials arrived at the gates, grim-faced Aurors and Unspeakables, bearing scrolls sealed with the minister's crest. They came seeking answers about the fading the strange disturbances that had nearly torn the wizarding world apart. Headmistress McGonagall received them in the Great Hall. "You'll understand," she said crisply, "that the inner workings of Hogwarts magic are not matters for ministry interference." Director Luthen, once the castle's reluctant ally, stood among them, older and wearier than before. "We're not here to interfere," he said softly. "But we've recorded fluctuations in ambient magic that trace back to this school. It's as if something or someone here is rewriting the flow." McGonagall's eyes flickered to the enchanted ceiling where clouds drifted lazily across the blue. "Then I suggest you tread carefully. Hogwarts doesn't take kindly to being prodded." Luthen inclined his head. "We only wish to understand, Headmistress. For if the limit truly sleeps beneath your foundations, then this piece may be only the eye of the storm." After they left, McGonagall sat alone for a long time, and as the sun set, painting the stone walls in gold and red, she heard it, a faint whisper, curling through the firelight. "He is right." McGonagall froze. The voice was soft, familiar. "Ilara?" The air shimmered, and the faint outline of the girl appeared by the hearth, her form woven from light. "You've kept them safe," Ilara said, "but the seals were never meant to last forever. They must breathe, as all living things do. The magic of the world shifts, changes shape. Soon it will test its boundaries again." The headmistress rose slowly. "You mean it will break free?" Ilara's silver eyes met hers. "No, it will be reborn." Before McGonagall could ask more, the girl's form faded, leaving only a single spark that drifted upward and vanished. When term began again, Scorpius and Amara returned to the castle, not as students, but as visitors, carrying the weight of what they had become. To the others they seemed unchanged, but those who looked closely saw a faint silver sheen beneath their skin, as though moonlight lingered in their veins. They spent hours in the dungeons, standing before the wall of the Founders. The sigils no longer glowed as they once had, yet both could feel the pulse of life behind the stone. "It's quieter," Amara said softly. Scorpius nodded, "like the calm before something new." He ran his fingers over the raven's sigil, tracing its outline. "Do you ever wonder what's beyond it? Beyond the limit?" She smiled faintly. "Some things aren't meant to be known." He glanced at her. "That's what Ilara used to say, but she still opened the door." Amara laughed, a soft, sad sound. "And now we're the ones left to keep it closed." Before either could say more, a low hum filled the corridor. The wall trembled faintly beneath their hands, and the sigils flared once. Lion, serpent, badger, raven. The air shimmered with silver light. A voice whispered through the stone, "Guardians of the new chain. The tide returns." Amara's eyes widened. "It's starting again." Scorpius turned toward her, the silver in his eyes gleaming brighter. "Then we'll face it as she did." That night the moon rose full over the lake, casting its reflection in ripples of pale light. The castle stood serene, aglow with candlelight and quiet laughter. Yet in the deepest chamber beneath its roots, unseen by any living soul, the heart of the seal began to pulse faster, its light deepening from silver to gold. Within that light 3 figures stood, shadows of Ilara, Scorpius, and Amara, watching as the threads of magic wound themselves anew. The world was changing. The boundaries that once divided the mortal from the mystical were thinning, reshaping. Ilara lifted her gaze toward the unseen sky above the stone ceiling. "The limit was never meant to end," she whispered, "only to remind us how far we may reach." and in the world above the first stars began to fall, shooting across the heavens like sparks from an unseen forge, lighting the night with a brilliance that no one could explain. Students awoke to watch them from the windows, breathless and wide-eyed. "What is it?" one whispered. Professor Longbottom stood beside them, smiling faintly as the silver streaks danced across the dark. "It's Hogwarts," he said quietly. "It's dreaming." And though none could hear it beneath the laughter and wonder, the ancient voice of the castle murmured softly through the stones, "Magic has no end, only beginnings." Autumn swept once more across the highlands, painting the trees in gold and scarlet. The scent of smoke and wet earth drifted over the castle grounds, mingling with the laughter of students who did not know that the very stones beneath their feet had nearly come undone. To them, Hogwarts had always been eternal, a fortress of learning, mystery, and light. Yet those who knew the truth felt a quiet weight in the air, a subtle pulse of something vast and sleeping. Headmistress McGonagall, older now and slower of step, could sense it with every passing season. When she walked the corridors, the portraits would bow their painted heads, and the suits of armor stood a little straighter, as if saluting not her, but what moved unseen beside her. The castle was alive, more so than ever before. In her study, she often felt a faint warmth beneath the soles of her feet, like a living heartbeat that thrummed through the stone. Some nights, when the wind was high, the sound of soft voices seemed to rise from below, faint and musical, echoing like a lullaby. It was on one such evening that Professor Longbottom burst into her office without knocking, his hair wild, his face pale. "Minerva," he gasped, "come quickly." Moments later, they stood together at the window, overlooking the black lake. The water was glowing, rippling with silver and gold, the light spreading outward in slow, perfect circles. McGonagall frowned. "It's begun again." Neville nodded grimly. "The magic's shifting. I can feel it in the soil. The wards haven't weakened, but they're changing shape." The headmistress's gaze hardened. "Ilara," he shook his head. "No, something new, something older." A low rumble rolled across the grounds, deep and resonant, as though the earth itself had taken a breath. The castle shuddered once and then was still. From the far side of the lake came a faint ringing, like bells struck underwater. And at that sound, the magic in the air stirred awake once more. In the days that followed, strange happenings returned to Hogwarts. Books whispered when opened, their pages turning of their own accord to spells no one had written. Portraits spoke in riddles of things beyond the veil. Even the ghosts seemed uneasy. Nearly headless, Nick was seen hovering anxiously near the great hall, muttering that the walls sounded different. Professor Flitwick reported the charms he'd cast decades ago were unweaving themselves, delicate enchantments drifting apart like cobwebs. "It's not decay," he explained to McGonagall and Longbottom during a midnight council. "It's renewal, as if the magic is rewriting itself from the foundation up." McGonagall rubbed her temples. "And the source?" "Beneath the school as ever," said Neville, "where the limit sleeps." The headmistress looked toward the window, where the moon shone through drifting mist. "Then we must go below again." The dungeons had grown colder than before. Frost veined the walls despite the season, and the torches flickered with pale blue flame. When the three of them reached the old chamber of the Founders, the wall of sigils awaited them, its surface smooth as glass, its carvings still and silent. McGonagall raised her wand, murmuring softly, "Revelio Maxima." The wall shimmered once, then burst into light. The 4 sigils glowed in sequence, lion, serpent, badger, raven, each one flaring brighter than the last. And from the heart of the wall came a voice. "Welcome, keepers of the chain." It was Alara's voice, yet layered with others. Scorpius's calm tone, Amara's soft timbre, and beneath them something vast, something older. Neville took a step forward. "Alara, what's happening?" "The world turns again," said the voice. "The limit shifts. The seals are not breaking. They are evolving. Magic is growing, and the boundaries must grow with it." Flitwick looked awed. "Evolving? As in becoming something more?" "As in becoming free," the voices answered. "The chains we forged were never prisons, they were paths. The river must change its course, or it will stagnate." McGonagall's eyes narrowed. "And what does that mean for us?" The wall pulsed with light, filling the chamber with warmth. "It means the age of guardians nears its end. The world no longer needs keepers. It needs guides. You have taught them long enough. Now they must walk beside the magic, not behind it." Neville exhaled slowly. "You're saying wizards will no longer rule it?" "Nor should they," came Alara's gentle reply. "Magic belongs to all things. The boundary will remain, but softer now, woven into the hearts of those who live with wonder." A long silence followed. McGonagall's expression softened. "Then our task is not to bind, but to prepare them." The light brightened once more, then faded. When it was gone, the wall stood still and silent, though its warmth lingered. By morning, word spread that something extraordinary had happened. During the night, the owls that delivered mail arrived not just with letters, but with bursts of silvery light trailing from their wings. The enchanted boats that ferried first years across the lake moved on their own, guided by invisible hands. Even the whomping willow stood perfectly still, its branches glimmering faintly as though dusted with starlight. Professor Flitwick, ever the scholar, declared that the structure of spells themselves had changed. "Simpler," he said with childlike awe, "more intuitive, as though the world itself wants to help us cast." Students found themselves performing small bits of accidental magic with ease, levitating quills, mending torn robes, without a wand at all. The ministry panicked, of course. By week's end, their envoys filled the castle again, demanding answers. But McGonagall only smiled her secret smile and told them the truth. "Magic is alive," she said. "You cannot legislate a heartbeat." They left unsatisfied, though not unshaken. That winter, McGonagall retired. She passed the headship to Amara Patel, now grown and calm, silver still glinting faintly in her eyes. Scorpius Malfoy took up the post of defense against the dark arts professor, his lessons less about spells and more about understanding the will that lay beneath them. And sometimes, when the castle slept and the fires burned low, they would both hear it, laughter echoing faintly in the halls, soft as falling snow. The laughter of Alara Byrne. It came less as a ghost than a memory, a reminder that the old world had not died, but transformed. Years passed. The wizarding world adapted slowly to this new rhythm. Spells grew gentler, potions more harmonious. Magic no longer bucked beneath the reins of those who wielded it. It moved beside them, a living companion rather than a tool. Hogwarts remained at the center of it all, the heart of the living boundary. traveler said its towers shone at night with a faint silver glow, and that if one listened closely in the great hall, they could hear a pulse beneath the stone. They said that when storms gathered over the lake, sometimes the lightning struck in fourfold color, red, green, yellow, and blue, and the air filled with the sound of distant wings, and those who stood on the highest tower swore that in the reflection of the moon they could see 3 figures watching the horizon, Alara, Scorpius, and Amara, their faces calm and their eyes full of starlight. The world had changed, but it endured. For as long as wonder lived, Hogwarts would live also, and somewhere beyond where light met shadow, the limit smiled, content at last to rest. The years that followed were quiet, and yet every quiet age is only the pause between 2 great heartbeats of the world. Magic had changed, and all who touched it felt the difference. The air in the corridors of Hogwarts seemed warmer, more alive. The castle breathed. Its stones creaked and sighed as though in contentment. The portraits, once mere echoes of their painted souls, now conversed with an awareness that startled even the oldest professors. The ghosts had grown clearer, their forms less sorrowful. The line between the living and the remembered blurred, and none could say where memory ended and spirit began. Outside the castle walls, the wizarding world shifted like a tide turning toward a new moon. The ministry still clung to its ledgers, its laws, and its wand regulations, but wizards and witches no longer feared magic itself. Farmers in the north found their fields growing by will alone, the soil answering the quiet songs they hummed as they worked. Children in small villages levitated pebbles for play without so much as a wand, and through all of it an unseen pulse spread outward from the heart of Scotland, the pulse of Hogwarts, the living anchor of the limit. Under Amara Patel's guidance, the school became a place unlike any in history. The curriculum had shifted away from the strict precision of old. Charms and transfiguration were taught alongside meditation and harmony, each student learning to sense the natural rhythm of magic before shaping it. Spells that once required months of discipline could now be woven in a whisper as easily as breathing. Yet for all the peace, whispers of unease lingered. Strange dreams plagued some of the students, dreams of a river made of stars flowing endlessly into the dark, carrying voices that spoke of beginnings and endings. Some woke weeping, others trembling, unable to say why. Scorpius Malfoy noticed the dreams first. He sat alone in his classroom late one night, marking essays, when the candles flickered and his quill froze in midair. The ink upon the parchment shimmered and twisted into unfamiliar runes. He leaned close and saw that they glowed faintly silver, the same color that had once filled his veins the day he became part of the chain. He read the words aloud in a whisper. When the river calls, the door will open once more. A cold wind brushed through the room, though the windows were sealed. He looked up. For a heartbeat, he saw her, Alara Byrne, standing in the doorway, her eyes bright as moonlight. Alara, he breathed. She smiled, faint and wistful. It begins again, Scorpius. The magic grows restless. The limit shifts in its sleep. He rose quickly. We sealed it. We gave everything to make it whole. You gave it life, she said softly, and life cannot be still. Before he could answer, she was gone, the light fading like breath on glass. At dawn, he sought Amara in the headmistress's office. She was already awake, standing by the great window, as mist drifted over the lake. I saw her, he said without preamble. Alara. Amara did not turn. I know. He blinked. You saw her too? I felt her, in the walls, in the lake, in the very air. The castle dreams of her still. She turned then, her eyes gleaming with that faint silver hue that marked her as bound to the chain. Something is stirring, Scorpius. The limit is not breaking, but it is changing shape again. The old seals are too small for what it's becoming. He frowned. Can it be contained? Contained? She echoed with a small, sad smile. We learned long ago that magic was never meant for cages. Her hand brushed the desk where the sorting hat rested. The ancient relic gave a low hum, its seams glowing faintly, as if it too had overheard. "What are you thinking?" Scorpius asked. Amara looked out toward the sunrise. Perhaps it is time to finish what Alara began, not by sealing magic away, but by setting it free. That night, the stars above Hogwarts burned brighter than any living soul remembered. The lake mirrored the heavens, each ripple casting light across the dark water. The students gathered on the lawns, murmuring in awe as streaks of silver light began to fall from the sky like rain. In the center of the courtyard stood Amara and Scorpius, wands lowered, faces calm. Around them the air shimmered with unseen power. The very walls of the castle hummed in harmony, as though waiting for their command. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. He nodded. "We are the chain no longer. Let's make it a bridge." They raised their wands together. The twin streams of light joined above them, rising like twin flames. The silver glow spread outward, reaching the towers, the halls, the forest beyond. Every stone, every leaf, every living creature felt the tremor of awakening. From the heart of the castle came Alara's voice once more, strong and clear, echoing through the night. "The limit is not the end of magic, but its promise. You who stand in wonder shall carry it forward. No more chains, no more cages, only harmony." The ground trembled. The light ascended, spiraling toward the stars. The old seals, carved in secret beneath the world's foundations, flared one last time before dissolving into threads of pure radiance. The pulse that had once been the heartbeat of the limit spread outward, blending with the very fabric of the world. Students gasped as their wands flickered to life, glowing not with flame, but with soft starlight. Spells leapt unbidden from their hearts, weaving patterns of beauty through the air, flowers of fire, ribbons of song, visions of places unseen. The castle shone like a beacon. When the brilliance finally faded, Hogwarts stood silent beneath a sky cleansed of storm. The students fell quiet, listening to the strange stillness that followed. Scorpius lowered his wand, breathing hard. "Is it done?" Amara smiled faintly. "Not done. Begun." He turned toward her, confused, but she only looked skyward. High above, the constellations had shifted, forming new patterns none had ever charted before. "They'll call this a miracle," he said. "They'll call it evolution," she replied. "The day magic learned to dream." In the days that followed, wizards and witches across the world felt the change. Magic no longer bent to will alone. It responded to harmony, to feeling, to truth. Those who sought control found it slippery as water, but those who sought connection found it deep and infinite. The old way of spells and strict incantations began to fade, replaced by song, by art, by thought. At Hogwarts, Amara gathered the youngest students beneath the ancient ceiling of the Great Hall. The candles flickered as she spoke. "Magic is not power," she told them. "It is a conversation. Listen, and it will speak back." Somewhere far away, The aurora that had crowned the world for generations faded into new colors, silver, violet, and gold. The old barriers between worlds, between seen and unseen, softened like frost beneath the morning sun, and on the wind that whispered through the castle windows, faint but unmistakable, came Alara's laughter once more, bright and unburdened. The children looked up, sensing it though they did not understand, for they were the first generation born to a world without walls. And above them, in the glittering night, Hogwarts gleamed like a star among stars, a beacon not of limits, but of endless beginnings. The centuries passed like pages in a living book, and still Hogwarts stood, its towers older, its stones smoother, its spirit bright. The castle became less a school and more a sanctuary, a meeting of worlds, both seen and unseen. Where once young witches and wizards came trembling to master their first spells, now they arrived as pilgrims, seeking to understand the living song that pulsed through the air. No longer were wands required, though many still carried them out of reverence for tradition. Magic had grown gentle, bound not by commands but by intention. A whisper, a thought, even a quiet hope could stir the air into light. The portraits were not mere memories now, but companions. They converse with visitors as old friends, guiding them through shifting corridors that reshaped themselves according to the wanderer's need. The ghosts had faded, at peace at last, their essence woven into the walls. It was said that if you pressed your palm to the stone, you could feel their warmth. Ilara, Scorpius, Amara, 3 voices that had become the breath of the school itself, and still the world beyond changed. Cities of wizard kind rose like jewels along the rivers, powered by magic that flowed in harmony with the land. There were no more dark lords, no more wars of control. Power was no longer something to hoard, for the river of magic had widened until it touched all living hearts. The Muggles, too, began to feel its call. They painted wonders they could not explain, wrote songs that stirred the air to shimmer, dreamed dreams that echoed with ancient voices. The two worlds, once divided, slowly began to overlap. In the 10th century after the Awakening, a child was born to a quiet village nestled beneath the Scottish hills. Her name was Aelith, and she was neither witch nor muggle, but something between, a child of both worlds. Her laughter could coax flowers to bloom even in winter. Her tears drew silver ripples in puddles at her feet. When she turned 11, a letter came, not of parchment and wax, but of light. Words written in the air, signed with the crest of a raven, a lion, a badger, and a serpent twined together. Her parents wept with joy, for Hogwarts still called to its chosen. The journey was no longer by train, for the rails had long been reclaimed by forest. Instead, she followed the river north, guided by silver sparks that danced upon the water. The journey took 3 days, and on the dawn of the 4th, she saw it. The castle rising from the mist, its towers aglow with morning light. Hogwarts. It looked different than in the old tales, taller, wider, alive. Ivy climbed its sides in patterns that glimmered faintly at dusk, and the banners of the 4 houses rippled with their own light. The great doors opened at her approach, not with the groan of hinges, but with a sigh of welcome. The hall within was vast and luminous. Candles floated as always, but now each flame carried a memory, a face, a laugh, a whisper. Above, the ceiling reflected not the weather outside, but the dreams of those within. Headmistress Alara greeted her at the dais. She was young in body, but old in gaze, her silver-flecked eyes marking her as a descendant of Amara's line. "Welcome, Aelith," she said, her voice clear as bells. "You have come home." The lessons of the age were unlike those of old. No longer were students sorted by courage, cunning, wisdom, or loyalty, for the houses had become one, the House of Hogwarts, united beneath a single emblem, a phoenix rising from 4 intertwined sigils. The sorting hat, its seams gleaming faintly, had become a relic of reflection, whispering not where one belonged, but what one must learn to balance within. Classes were not of rigid spells or strict disciplines. Instead, they learned the harmonies of nature, the rhythm of rain, the hum of flame, the whisper of wind through willow leaves. They studied not only the art of shaping magic, but of listening to it. And each year when spring came, the students gathered on the lakeshore for the Festival of Light. They would stand beneath the open sky, holding torches whose flames mirrored their souls, and the headmistress would lead them in a chant older than memory. That night, the lake would shine with the faces of those who came before, the guardians, the founders, the dreamers, and their voices would rise together in a single ageless refrain. Magic has no end, only becoming. Yet even in this golden age, stories whispered of the deeper magic, the one that had no name. It was said that in the deepest chamber of the castle, beneath all known floors, and older than the first brick laid by Godric Gryffindor himself, there existed a door of light. No hinge, no lock, only a smooth surface that shimmered like water. Many had sought it, none had returned. But Aelith dreamed of it often. She would wake with the sound of a soft heartbeat in her ears, as though the castle itself called to her. One night, unable to resist, she rose from her bed and followed the sound. The halls guided her, the torches flickering to lead the way. Down she went, past the dungeons, past the forgotten stair, until at last she stood before the door of legend. It gleamed faintly, rippling like the surface of the lake. Without hesitation, she reached out her hand. The moment her fingers touched it, warmth flooded through her. Images flashed. Ilara standing before the silver wall, Scorpius raising his wand beneath the northern lights, Amara smiling beneath a sky of falling stars, and then she heard their voices, woven together. "Welcome, child of the new dawn. The river flows still." The door opened. Beyond was light, endless, pure, alive. She stepped through, and the world folded around her like the turning of a page. When she awoke, she was standing on a field of starlight. The air shimmered, and before her stood 3 figures. "Alara," Aelith whispered, recognizing her from every story she had ever heard. The woman smiled. "Not Alara alone. We are all who came before, the guardians, the dreamers, the keepers of the limit." Aelith's heart pounded. "Why me?" "Because you are the firstborn into the world we only imagined," said Scorpius, his voice gentle. "The world without boundaries." Amara's hand rested on her shoulder. The limit was never meant to bind. It was meant to teach. And now, it is yours to carry forward, no longer as a chain, but as a song. Light swirled around her, and she felt herself rising, the stars folding inward. When she opened her eyes again, she was standing beside the lake. The door of light was gone, the water calm. Yet when she lifted her hand, silver sparks danced from her fingertips, twining into the air before fading. She smiled, understanding. And so the legend continued. Aelith became the new guardian, not of seals or walls, but of harmony itself. She taught generations to see magic not as a force to command, but as a companion to walk beside. Under her care, Hogwarts thrived beyond measure, and the world with it. On nights when the stars shone brightest, travelers passing near the castle swore they could hear a melody rising from its highest tower, soft, clear, and endless. It was said to be the voice of Alara Byrne, singing still of wonder and courage, of boundaries broken and worlds reborn. And thus, the tale of the limit of magic came to its true ending, not in silence, but in song.